Nighttime on Still Waters. This is NB 506812, narrowcasting into the night from somewhere on Britain's waterways. (21st of February, Saturday). A silvered dawn, milder air with a promise of spring, plum blossom and cowslips. There's a soft sou'westerly blowing along the canal. It's playing hide and seek with a young crescent moon that hangs low in the west. Catkins and reeds quietly lean with the wind flow, and the canal is keeping its counsel tonight. And this is the narrowbird Erica, narrowcasting into the darkness of a February night, to you, wherever you are. Oh, welcome. It's so lovely to see you. I was hoping you'd come. The air's mild and the night is alive, but the towpaths are muddy and slick. So come inside where the kettle is singing and the biscuit barrel is beside a warm stove. And there's a seat waiting specially for you. So mind your head as you come in, and welcome aboard. The rather repetitive weather patterns for this year continue, cycling between mild and chilly, still and windy, with the only constant being heavy skies and persistent waves of rain. Last week, the wind veered northerly once more, bringing a bracing rawness with it that made the cosy warmth of the boat cabin an even more attractive prospect. However, within the last day or so, a milder airstream has arrived again. The paths are still all churned mud, and the fields along the canal side are still waterlogged. But there's a suggestion of fairer days here, the portents of a spring that is already beginning to come. And there's also been another, ostensibly less welcome portent of spring that's been evident recently. All along the towpath, thin whips of new-growth bramble, neatly clipped, lie strewn among the mud and leaf mould. I see it around this time each year, and each year I glower and grumble at the crass ridiculousness of it. Who on earth is doing it? Cutting this first flush of new life? Trimming the towpaths into some sterile landscape of a formal garden? I mean, what type of people come to somewhere wild, bringing with them their secretaires to impose their perceptions of tidiness onto it? And for goodness sake, the brambles themselves at this point are not even encroaching onto the path proper, or hanging low to snag a designer woolen beanie. Later in the year, when thick bramble vines, dragon-thorned, cast snares all along the way, I can sort of understand, within reason, but this seems so utterly pointless. I spent a lot of time fuming about this. But then, this year, it has suddenly struck me, and I'm not sure why it hadn't struck me before. And I've not actually seen the culprit, but I have a very good idea who it is. And it was Maggie who first put me onto it, finding the clue that eventually, I think, breaks the case. Normally, she wanders along the towpath with the nose to the ground. But along this particular stretch, and especially recently, she trots, looking up into the canopies of the row of oaks that reach out over us, and which makes this such an idyllic spot in rain and sun. This is Squirrel Haven. Shapes dart and leap, flying from branch to branch. And of course, it makes total sense. The neatly snipped bramble twines that look so much like the work of a well-maintained Sheffield steel blade also resemble the viciously sharp work of a pair of incisors. I come back to the boat and check my copy of Bang and Dahlstrom. And while it doesn't mention brambles and squirrels, the bite profiles match neatly. It's squirrels at work, feeding, managing their nests or drays. And it's even been noted, I read, that if a twig or branch happens to fall onto the ground, the squirrels will just leave it and find another. And suddenly, this litter of young briar stems looks so different. And no longer does it fill me with an annoyed irritation at the needless vandalism and arrogance. I look at each twine and imagine the attention and intention behind its cutting. The tiny fingers that held, the sharp teeth gnawed through it. The litter is no longer litter. It's a sign of life, a sign that the seasons are turning, a sign that this is how things should be. The lesson brought me up short. And it's a good lesson to be reminded of. How assumptions and perceptions can change something so dramatically. How things can easily be misattributed. What a waste of my anger. And the needless suspicion that can cast an edge to my good morning when I come across groups of walkers along this stretch of the towpath at this time of the year. Perhaps even realizing how ideas of what constitutes vandalism and waste can change. These young stems, after all, still lie discarded, unused in the mud, cast aside and useless. So why in this instant does the fact that, as far as I can tell, it was made by a squirrel, or a group of them, make it okay for me? But not if it was cut by a well-meaning but, in my view, misguided walker. It's been lovely to hear from you and reading all of your comments and emails and voicemails too. And it's a great joy to give a special welcome and greeting to Rose, who joins our growing band of listeners in Australia. Rose, it has been especially lovely to hear from you and to hear how the podcast in some ways helping you to feel a little bit closer to your mother, who grew up in Yorkshire and the Wirral. I'm also pleased to hear that listening to the podcast and talk of our weather over here helps you to feel a little bit cooler. Rose mentioned that where she's living, it's currently been around in the 40 degrees centigrade. That's 104 degrees Fahrenheit plus. Rose, I also must say that Clover, your partner's dog, is absolutely gorgeous. And I'm really glad that you stumbled upon us here. And a very warm, or should I say cooling, welcome to you. And over on Facebook, hello to Jason and Karen. I've been thinking of you both. How did the survey go? I hope everything is progressing okay. Hello also to Tracy Thomas and to Deb Moon Mountford. And greetings also to John McMahon. And John, cheers and your very good health. Greetings also to Captain Arlo. Captain, I hope that you're surviving the blizzards over there. Lee's also contacted me, remarking that while we're having the wettest of times over here, she's actually experiencing a worrying lack of snowfall and the resulting concerns of wildfires and drought. So, Captain, if you could blow some of the snow that you're having over towards her, I'm sure she would be very grateful. And also, hello to Anna McKellar, who, as always, it's so lovely to hear from you, Anna. Yeah, there are many different ways of identifying when the actual midpoint of winter falls. And I guess it all comes down to whether you're working from the length of night and the length of daylight or temperatures or any of the variables. So I just work with what works best for you. I love the advert that Shambles sent me this week. It read, "Want a new challenge? Retrain as a swan," under which there was a lovely picture of a swan looking extremely serene. It went on to say, "No previous experience necessary. Includes training on honking, gliding serenely, eating bits of bread, and breaking a man's arm." I'm tempted, Shambles. I am tempted. Greetings also to Kate on the Narrowboat Hermit. Thank you so much, Kate, for your comment about the episode on Lucy M. Boston's River at Green Knowe. And thank you so much for recommending her book, The Sea Egg. I've never come across this title before. It's completely new to me, but it looks really interesting and full of that Lucy M. Boston magic, and I'm definitely going to keep my eye open for a copy. And actually, Kate posted an amazing photograph on Instagram with some words that I feel so beautifully capture life on the canals. And with her permission, I'm sharing this with you. She wrote, "There are just 2 logs left in the basket, and an unstable southwesterly wind rails against Hermit's steel hull. The sun has only been down 2 hours, and while the sou'wester has brought milder temperatures, she drives rain through the nooks and crannies and fills the boat with chilly draughts. It's no good. I need more fuel for the fire. I pull on my boots and take a wet step down into the mud and the dark. My neighbour stands silent and silhouetted, sucking a cigarette on the bow deck of his narrowboat, wreathed in smoke and lit like a Lynchian dream scene under a red parasol, watching the pink swans browsing the banks." Oh, that's such an evocative picture, Kate, and thank you for letting me share it. And all that remains now for me to do is just to say a big thank you to all of our Lockwheelers for supporting this podcast. They are Anna McKellar, Susan Baker, Shambles, Clare Hollingsworth, Kevin B., Fleur and David Mcloughlin, Lois Raphael, Tania Yorgey, Andrea Hansen, Hinds, Chris and Alan on the narrowboat The Land of Green Ginger, Captain Arlo, Rebecca Russell, Alison on the narrowboat Mucker, Derek and Pauline on Silver Fox, Anna V, Orange Cookie, Mary Keane, Tony Rutherford, Arabella Holtzapfel, Rory with MJ and Kayla, the narrowboat Precious Jet, Linda Reynolds Birkins, Richard Noble, Carol Ferguson, Tracy Thomas, Mark and Tricia Stowe, and Madeline Smith. Thank you. My gentle hill, I rest beside you in the dark, in a place warmed by my body, where by ardour, grace, work, and loss, I belong. That was Song by Wendell Berry, and it was sent to me by Lee Thomas in response to the episode before last, when, having noted how this was amazingly our 6th winter afloat, and I began a reflection on how life has and has not changed since we've moved aboard the Erica. And the main point was that both Donna and I feel more at home here than anywhere else that we've ever lived, as happy as those times often were. And it also made Lee reflect on the life that she has chosen to lead in her old cabin far up in the foothills of the Colorado mountains. And in many ways, the practicalities of her life and those of ours on a boat resemble one another. The physicalness of it, as well as the need to plan ahead and prepare in both short and longer terms. but also living in proximity to the elements and the lives, particularly non-human, that are lived so closely around us. Lee noted that it was her first and only home, in which she has lived for, if my math's correct, for nearly 40 years. Here life can be seriously challenging. In her email, she wrote, "Today, for instance, it was just 13 degrees Fahrenheit in the afternoon, snowing with a cold wind blowing at about 22 miles per hour. That's a wind chill of -3 degrees Fahrenheit. And with the temperature tonight forecast to drop to -3 with winds up to 24 miles per hour. That means a -24 degrees Fahrenheit wind chill. Cold wind makes it impossible to warm this house up very well. So I'm bundled up in 3 warm layers, and sometimes have also wrapped up in a blanket." Nevertheless, Lee can conclude, "I too have never felt so at home as in this difficult little house." And the next poem she included, also by Wendell Berry, struck a particular note with me. And it's a short poem called Woods. I part the outthrusting branches and come in beneath the blessed and the blessing trees. Though I am silent, there is singing around me. Though I am dark, there is vision around me. Though I am heavy, there is flight around me. And it seems to me that these 2 poems and Lee's reflections, together with what I was trying to explore in that episode, is the way in which home is far greater than place. Quite often the place itself may be far from perfect, and living within it can be challenging and at times uncomfortable. Nevertheless, it helps to create an environment in which you can feel at ease, true to yourself, and I think as importantly, true to everything around you. It's a sense of belonging, as Wendell Berry's first poem states. Being a part of, yet recognizing the luxury that being a part does not necessitate that requirement of being indispensable to the whole. Some of the ducks here, particularly that little group of 10+2 that collect along this stretch of the canal, now begin to look up and respond in part to me now. They're not tame to me, and I'd be deeply uncomfortable if they were. But they're not scared either. We brush along together, sharing our home. This channel of water between churned mud, trodden grass, and newly grown green. And I know the day when I am not here, their world will not significantly change. In fact, the weather has more effect on their lives than me, and I relish that. I may try to do small, incidental things that make their lives a little easier, but they're not dependent upon me. And home is where we can afford to be ourselves, even to let the imperfections of who and what we are show, with the security of knowing that those around accept us for who we are. And that comment that we feel more at home here seemed to strike home with many of you. And I received a lot of really wonderful comments about that particular feeling that's perhaps so familiar and yet so hard to define in words. And I really loved Hannon Cohen's comment on Masterton. He wrote, "Uncharacteristically of you, you search for a word to describe your feelings. And the word that came to my mind was whole. That's a very good thing to be." Yes, and whole is a really good word. I think I feel more whole than I ever have before. My main reservation would be that whole, like complete, carries the implication of something finished, completed. And it doesn't quite feel like that to me. I'm still at a place in my life where forward movement, the continued journey, is not just important but inherent. However, I also recognize that there is a sense in which wholeness is not primarily about some kind of emotion. It moves beyond a defined emotion and is not rigidly forced into a specific emotional response, and I do really like that. And I love words that become too big to be imprisoned by their definitions. I remember listening to a Hebrew professor once describing the vast semantic range of that tiny Hebrew word, tov, normally translated into English as good. Under his exposition, the simple statement following each creative act in Genesis 1, and it was good, culminating in the final, and it was very good, blossomed into such a rich lexical garden of meaning and colour that would rival any found in the next chapter to describe Eden. And finding the right word also got Margaret thinking. Over the time of this podcast, Margaret has shared with me her deep interest in words and linguistics, which she gained from her time at university, particularly in relation to early English and Anglo-Saxon. And following the episode, and particularly my use of the words happy and content, she wrote to tell me how her finals at university engaged with a piece of research into comparative computational linguistics. And then going on to write, so we determined a group of 7 words with similar but also different meanings, and produced a thesis on the comparisons, similarities, differences, nuances, etc., and how we computed them into our own usage. My group of words was love, cherish, worship, adore, honour, respect, and like. And then Margaret went on to write, so now, because I still like working with words in this way, I'm producing myself a new list, which so far includes happy, content, satisfied, and maybe pleased, delighted, fulfilled, looking for a 7th word. Hannon, I mentioned to Margaret your suggestion of whole, which she felt could actually really fit rather neatly as that 7th word. However, what I like most of all is how, at the moment, it still remains unfound, undiscovered. The feeling, the experience is there and real enough, but it remains, for now at least, unnamed. The 7th word, the part of us and our experience that refuses to be contained, to be pinned like a butterfly onto the corkboards of our lexicons. Perhaps we all have in some way that experience of looking for that 7th word. So, has living on a boat had any real impacts upon how we see ourselves and how we see the world, to finish that set of questions posed by Lee in that episode? As this is about boat life, I feel almost obliged to use the current terminology that's so much in vogue over the last few years on social media, and amend that question as, has living on a small boat, or even a tiny home, made any lasting changes? But at 58 foot, the area has never really felt particularly small to me. Contained, yes. And it's true that there are quite a few cramped corners and spaces, but I've never really thought or considered this being small or tiny living. Just, I suppose, living in a more considered way. So I'll stick with the way I started. Has living on a boat changed me mentally and the way that I look at the world? And the quick answer would be undoubtedly yes. However, like the answers in the previous episode, I would also have to add, but I think it's a bit more complicated than that. As far as a sense of mental well-being is concerned, life afloat does make a positive difference. When I'm able to work from home, and when I get stressed or I need to still my head, being able to simply just slide back the stern hatch just beside the desk here in the study and go out and stand in the fresh air and watch the wind play among the reeds across the water surface, or simply look at ducks doze in the sun or land in a rush of air and crystal water drops, it really does help. But I'm also aware that I've had my worst time mentally while being afloat too. And also, like many, I've been struggling this year. I guess what I'm trying to say is that life afloat can help, but it's not a complete cure-all. While your surroundings change, it is still the same you that is living within those new surroundings. And the truth always is that wherever you go, you will be bringing your shadows and ghosts with you. And even here, you cannot outrun them. Canal life is not that panacea, and despite the way canal life is often presented in the media, I am wary of recommending it as a silver bullet to anyone struggling with their mental health. There are plenty of aspects about this type of life that can make it much, much worse. And there's also a lot of talk about nature as healing and the way that being outdoors helps with mental health and mental well-being. But I think, my experience is that it's only half true, or possibly a third true. The most difficult challenges that I currently face with my mental health arise precisely from my living so close to it. But I wouldn't change it. And it also should be said that there are as many stresses and worries when living afloat as there are living anywhere else. They might just be called by a slightly different name, but the end result, though, is still the same. And there's no difference in depth or shade in the worry caused by mortgage or rent to the worry about mooring fees or boat licenses. Having a mandatory 4 yearly inspection for boat safety is important, but can also feel intrusive. Routine maintenance can also at times feel onerous and never-ending. Job lists never get fully finished as more items are constantly added. And keeping an eye on the electrics, a constant eye on leaks, usually above the waterline, not being able to see a third of the boat until you can take it out of the water, and 101 other little stresses can all add up. And worry is worry wherever you are. And a beautiful sunset that turns the water to fire never looks quite as Instagram pretty when you have just noticed a creeping damp patch on the floor, or that the battery level is unexpectedly low. And it can be very tempting to think of this kind of life as getting away from it all. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people choose this life, and to some extent us too. But in reality, it's never really the case. Although a part of me have always recognized this, even before we moved aboard, the way that life outside, or land life, still manages to impose itself took a bit of getting used to. There's often talk about this type of life in terms of nomadism, off-grid, even hermitic, a way of casting off the shackles of modern life and living wild and free under the sun and wind and starlight, where we can trundle at less than walking speed up and down the canals, untouched by the rush and madness of modernity. However, land life still has a way of impinging, of reminding you that it still has a hold of sorts on you. And the lack of a postcode can make the necessary interactions with bureaucracy and officialdom, and even some types of commerce, stressful. Added to which, canal time and land time don't always sit comfortably together. And whilst living here does create a sense of distance and being somewhat a part of, for want of a better word, mainstream life, and the pace of life is definitely slower, I have to say that I think the me of 6 years ago might be a little surprised by how much I do not feel part of an alternative life, and how entangled I still feel within a world whose values and goals I profoundly disagree. And this realization has made me think again about my expectation and assumptions, and I'm not sure that this sense of entanglement, as uncomfortable and challenging as it can be, is not particularly a bad thing anymore. There is, after all, a messiness to life, and I am growing ever more suspicious of constructed divisions and polarities, the us and thems, the creation of petty tribes. And so, are there any clear conclusions? Or maybe, as with that previous episode, the changes have now become so normalized into our lives that what might appear strange or different no longer feels that way. It just feels like home, and the stuff of life goes on, whether on land or water, or straggled awkwardly between the both, which is where I often feel the most. And so I think the general trends and the shape are the same. They're just a little bit more heightened at times by being on water and our own particular lifestyle. Nothing can throw into sharp relief the emptiness of the consumer dream when you live in a home that has no room, either literally or figuratively, for the torrent of commodities that they want to sell you. And nothing can remind you of the real world behind the digital screen than the sound of wind among the alders, or the gentle rock of the boat as a northeasterly wind barrels along the canal, or watching cygnets struggle out of their eggs and being nuzzled by the beaks of their mum and dad. And here is home, and I'm grateful for that, and cannot imagine a place I would rather be. It's not perfect. It can be a life filled with messy and sometimes unsatisfactory compromise. But then, that's what our lives are about, right? We try to do the best thing in our current situations. And possibly the best way to end this is with a line or two from WH Auden. And it was also sent to me by Lee, who felt it sums up how she feels about the life that has found her. And I too can feel its complicated truths here in my life too. This rock is Eden. Shipwreck here. And then, of course, there is that seventh word. The sense, the feeling is there and real enough. But the search for it continues. And long may it continue. And this is the Narrowboat Erica, signing off for the night and wishing you a very restful and peaceful night. Good night. Temperature outside 10.1 degrees. Inside 21 degrees. Humidity 95%. Dew point 9 degrees. Wind direction, southwest. Wind strength, 13 miles per hour. Barometric pressure, 1016.3, steady. Cloud cover, 90%. Cloud ceiling, 2,000 feet. Precipitation, 1.27 millimeters. Moon phase, 21.8%, waxing crescent. Day length, 10 hours 21 minutes. Sunset, 17:32. Sky casting, 7:09.